Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the session from Windfarms to Adaptation Bond AIIB Sustainability Journey. My name is Julia Polycarp and I will be your moderator for the session today. Before I begin, we would like to play a short video that showcases our journey in climate and sustainability. And then I will invite the panelists to join the stage.
Spread and rapidly intensifying, the window to build resilient, future-ready infrastructure is narrowing fast. The global community must stand together, and multilateral development banks, including the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, have a vital role to play. Sustainability and green infrastructure financing have been central to AIIB's mission since 2016. From day one, we've financed the infrastructure for tomorrow, accelerating the green transition with projects spanning 38 economies across 5 continents. AIIB's investments have brought clean power to millions, created more livable cities, protected communities from disasters such as flooding, and improved biodiversity conservation. Our ambition for over half of our financing to support climate action by 2025 was achieved 3 years early. Guided by our Climate Action Plan, we're committed to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. All our investments are now Paris Agreement aligned, and we've expanded our financing with tailored instruments to support innovative green projects, including climate policy-based financing, sustainability-linked and blue loans, as well as issuing Asia's first adaptation-focused bond. But much more is needed. Whether through nature-based solutions or technology, AIIB is pioneering innovative solutions to maximize development impact. We're dedicated to fostering a sustainable, inclusive future for all, because the infrastructure we invest in today will determine the world we live in tomorrow.
May I request the panelists to please come on stage, and we'll do a short round of introductions and then we'll start with our session. Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me well. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Julia Polycarp, a Senior Climate Specialist working in the AIIB Sector Themes and Finance Solutions Department, and it is my pleasure to welcome this distinguished panel comprised of key leaders and experts in climate and sustainability field to our session today. Let me first introduce one by one, and then we'll start with some questions and presentations. So here we have Mr. Xu, who is a Director for National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation under the Ministry of Economy of China. Then we have Mr. Makbudin, United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Change, Special Envoy for the Financing of Sustainable Development, apologies. Then we have Mr. Henry Gonzalez, who is the Chief Investment Officer, Green Climate Fund. Mr. DJ Pandyan, who is the Director General, Indian Regional Office of the New Development Bank. And last but not least, Mr. Hun Kim, Director General, Sector Themes and Finance Solutions of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So today we will be discussing the topic of sustainability and climate change and reflecting on AIIB's 10-year journey to get to where we are today. We'll be dwelling on the topic of how to integrate sustainability into infrastructure investments and what are the key roles that MDBs, private sector, and governments play in this regard. But first I would like to start with Mr. Xu. I know you have a small presentation that you would like to show us, which really reflects on what China is doing in the space of sustainability. I know Mr. Xu is a lead co-author of several actually IPCC reports. One of them even received the Nobel Peace Prize, so we'll be very keen to hear from you, Mr. Xu, on what has China done in the space of climate change.
Thank you, facilities. 我想我今天还是用中文吧，这样子比较流利一点。
Okay, please allow me to use Mandarin to speak. I'm very happy to join today's AIIB's annual meeting for 10 years anniversary, and I congratulate AIIB for your efforts in over the past 10 years in terms of green development and sustainable development. Today, I'm happy to have this opportunity to share with you the progress China has made in terms of fighting against the climate change and our outlook in the future. 10 years ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a speech in Paris Agreement conference. He said, tackling climate change is a shared mission for mankind. It demonstrates the most basic knowledge about climate change. And Chinese President Xi Jinping also made an announcement during the 75th UN General Assembly to put forward the dual carbon goals. The carbon neutrality and carbon peak need to be realized before 2030 and before 2060. So this tool before has demonstrated our commitment to realize the target. So we are so ambitious to realize the target. So to reach the zero carbon target, Chinese government has released a series of policies. 10 years ago, we released the policies to support the realization of the target. We have illustrated 10 major measures and actions to be taken. The most important one is that we have identified the future target for the next 35 years. That means by 2060, the non-fossil fuel energy mix in China need to be over 80%. Now, the non-fossil energy mix is large. But by 2060, the share of non-fossil energy consumption will be 80%. It shows our confidence. So China has also made greater efforts to promote the high-quality development of new energy. I want to share with you some data. In 2023, China's investment in energy transition reached $676 billion, making it the world's largest investor in this field. So this is the first data. Second data, as of the end of 2024, the installed capacity of wind and PV power generation in China has reached 1.41 billion kilowatts, 2.63 times that of the end of 2020, achieving our promised target of 1.2 billion kilowatts under NDC 6 years ahead of the schedule. At the same time, China's NEV industry is developing at an accelerated pace. As of the end of 2024, the number of new energy vehicles in China has reached 31.4 million, nearly 6 times that of the end of 2020. China is the only country with annual production over 10 million every year in the world. So last year, in July, August, and September, the NEV's penetration exceeded 50% consecutively. Second data is that something closely related to the carbon trade market. As of the end of 2024, a total of 2,428 power generation companies have been included in the national carbon market. So last year, we experienced half-year small fluctuations. Now, the price has reached 105 yuan per ton. So it means a rising of 119% from the opening price. So another data is that through South-South cooperation, China has provided greater support to other developing countries. And China has signed 50
5 Memorandum of Understanding on Climate Change, South-South
我们也
Cooperation
顺利推动了
with
与5个非
44
洲国
developing
家签署
countries,
的非洲
and
光带
we
合作文
have
件，
signed
预计将帮助
agreement
解决近
of
3.5万非洲无电家庭
helping Africa
日常用电问
countries
题。
for
应
providing
该说，中
powers
国作为发展中国家，
for
在做好
African
自身的能源
households.
绿色低碳转型的过程中，也为发展中国家
It shows that
提供了
China
可
has
能源的
provided
最大的帮
our
助。
support to
那么这里
African
面我们也有一
countries
个数据，
while we are
我
developing
们为全球
ourselves,
提供
and we
70%
have
的
provided
光伏组件
70%
和
of PV
60%的
components
风电设备。
and 60% of
目
wind
前
farm
全球
equipment to the
光伏发
world.
电装机容量
Now,
近一半在中
over
国，
half of installed
全球新
capacity
能源汽车
of
一半以
renewable
上
energy
行驶在中
come
国。
from China, and
全球1/4%
%50% of
新增的
electric
绿化面
vehicle
积
are running
也
in
来自中
China,
国。
and green over
那么
50% of
这
the
第
world
第二届的我也
green
想
area
结合
comes
今天的
from
主题
China.
呢，
So
在
second,
做
I
好
want to
绿色
echo
金
to
融大恒
today's
商方面
theme.，
无论是
Our aim is
中国的
to
金融
create
机
a
构，
great
还
article
是
on
亚
green
投行、
finance.
亚洲开发银行等等，包括世界银行，在这方
No
面
matter
可以
China's
大有作为。
financial
那么
institutions,
尤其是
AIIB
去
or
年
ADB
中国人民
or
银行
WB
出
will
台
have a
了
big
相
role to
关的
play.
政策文
Last
件，
year, China's
明确
PBOC
提
central
出
bank
要
issued
主动
relevant
引
policy
领
documents
全球绿
indicating
色
that
金融议题，
we will play an
为
active
全
role
球应
in
对气候
guiding
变化贡
global
献中
green
国智慧，
finance
也
topics
明确提出
to contribute
支持
China's
有条
share
件
to
的
global
地
climate
方
response.
开展气候投
It
融资试
also
点。
mentioned that we will
探索
support
建立
relevant
气候友好
places
型的
in
投融
conducting
资体制机
climate
制。
financing
这
pilot
些方面
programs in
都为
building
中国加快推
climate-friendly
进能源绿
financing
色低碳转
mechanisms.
型，
And these
有效防范
measures
气候风险。
have helped China
提供
in
了强有
accelerating
力的
the
金
green
融的
energy
支撑和
transition
保障。
and
那么
preventing climate
这里
risks.
边我就
It
介
has
绍一下中国
provided strong
政府
financial
今年的工作
support
报告。
in this regard.
我们明
In
确
this year's
强
Chinese
调
government
要
work report,
完善支持
we have made
绿
it
色低
clear
碳发
that
展的
we
政
will
策和
improve
标
the
准体系，
policies and
营
standards
造
in
绿色
support
低
of
碳
green
产业
and low
健
carbon
康发展生
development.
态。
And we will
与此同
create
时，我们要
a sound
建
development
立起
ecosystem
零碳
for
园
the
区、
green
零
and
碳
low
工
carbon
厂，
industries.
要
At the same
建
time,
立
we
产
will
品
build
碳足迹管
zero
理体系。
carbon industrial
碳标
parks
签
and
认证制度
factories, and
这
also
个应对
build
绿色的贸易壁垒。
carbon management systems
值得我们
for the
关注
product
的，也
certification
今年政府
in
工作报告
active
中
response to
首
the
次
green
明
trade
确提
barriers.
出要规划应
In
对气候
this
变
year's
化，
government
一揽子
work
重大工
report,
程。
for the first time, we
还要
mentioned
积极参与和
that
引领
climate
全球
response
气
is
候
still
治理。
our priority.
这为
And
我
we
们
will play an
绿色
active
金
role
融的
in leading
投资
and participating in
注入
global
了
climate
强劲的
governance.
动力。
This has provided strong
那么
impetus
最后
to
我想
our investment
用
in green
2个月
finance.
前习主席在
In the end,
气候和
I
公
want to
正的领
quote
导人峰
President
会上的
Xi
致辞中，
Jinping
他这次
from
强调，
his
无论国
address
际
in
形势
the
如何
Climate
变化，
Justice
中
and
国积极应
Transition
对气
Summit
候
2
变化
months
的
ago.
行动。
He
不会放软
emphasized that
促进
no
国际
matter
合作的
what
努力
changes in the
不会
global
减弱
landscape, China
推动构建
will
人民命运
stay
共同体
committed
的
to
实
climate
践
response
不会停息。
in our
我也
actions
期待着
and in
亚投
promoting
行
global
在推动
cooperation
中国
so as to
应
build
对
a
气候
community
变
with a
化
shared future for
引领
mankind.
全
We
球绿
will
色转
stay
型方面发挥
remitting in our
更大的
efforts.
作用。
And I
谢
look
谢。
forward to AIIB play a greater role in China's response to climate change and leading global green transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Xu. I can have some takeaways from your intervention. So China has kept its promise, and it's working very hard in meeting its carbon emission targets. So that was indeed very interesting. You've touched upon the South-South cooperation. You touched upon the different energy capacity installed and EV production and kind of a whole economy approach when it comes to climate transition. Now let me move to our next panelist, Mr. Makbuldin. You are taking over many roles. You've formerly been a high-level champion for climate as the UN Conference on Climate Change happened in Egypt under the Egyptian presidency. You are now the co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council. So now as we are approaching COP30 in Belém, we would be very keen to hear your perspective of how and what would make this COP stand out, and how different organizations such as the MDBs can help to make this a very impactful conference in Brazil.
Right, thank you so much. Let me first express my gratitude for the kind invitation and join everyone in celebrating the great progress of AIIB and wishing it to have more continued progress in the future. The plans for the future are even much better and bold than in the past, which is great. We had a great deal of respect to the leadership of this institution and the way that it benefited from the experience of many of the multilateral development banks. And that gets me into a kind of a segue as well, and congratulate the excellent presentation by you, Mr. Shonau, and what you have shown us, that the leadership is very much keen to push further for the climate action agenda. And what we see today, that we are not lacking the technical expertise or the possible partnerships between the private and the public sector, but for countries that manage to do better in climate action as part of sustainable development, these are the countries that manage to have greater coordination under great political leadership. And it's not out of playing a nice game with the international players, but basically for countries realize that's in the interest of the country, it's in the nation's interest, in addition, of course, to the global goals, that we pursue these tough kind of measures for progress. Having said that, you asked me about Belém and what we are expecting. This is a very much important year on the climate agenda and on the finance for development agenda. I'm traveling from here directly to Spain, in Seville, for the Finance for Development conference, which is reminding us that after 10 years of Addis, that there is a great deal of work that has to be conducted. And one area of work, and I hope that you can share with me on this, share me with this kind of understanding, that we don't need really to work on silos. Climate action is part of sustainable development. And the successful work in areas related to climate action, which is basically areas of emphasis, as we have seen in the presentation, when it comes to energy, this is SDG 7, one of the most important areas of work. And if you are asking me in terms of finance and the gaps of finance of the SDGs, when we started it was around $2.5 trillion, now it's $4 trillion. 80% of this financing gap has to do with infrastructure, and 80% of the infrastructure has to do with energy. So energy, as highlighted, is very much in the center of activities when it comes to substance of partnerships and the requirements of finance. But mind you, great deal of funding shouldn't be coming from governments. Private sector had found the solutions for that, and the private sector can really do a better job. But we need from governments better regulations, perhaps decent offtake agreements, stability in the business environment, rule of law, and better engagements with the domestic players and the international players. We have a bigger problem, which I hope is going to be solved in Belém, which about adaptation, which is again part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Because adaptation or resilience is either about water management, SDG 6, or food and agriculture, which is SDG 2, or dealing with the needs of cities and resilience of infrastructure at large, which is between SDG 9 and SDG 11. So those who have been living in silos for bureaucratic reasons, they have been misleading us for a great deal of time. And actually, it's very much hard to convince any fellow villager from Egypt to tell them, well, I'm happy just to fix the problems of the world of emissions. They would tell you, well, our emissions are very limited. But what's in it for us when it comes to climate finance and climate action, if we can manage to get better funding for adaptation and for mitigation, with a better mix of blended finance. Here, I see the bias, and I'm very much guided by good wisdom of, again, from China being here, but I've been quoting the great words of a great reformer of last century, Deng Xiaoping, when he met President McNamara. And he told me, a very proud Chinese leader, he told him, we can do all reforms on our own, but with you, World Bank. McNamara at the time was the president of the World Bank. With you, we can do it faster and better. This is basically the criteria for any kind of country's engagement when we do business with the AIIB, with the Green Climate Fund, with the World Bank, with the African Development Bank. And my advice, because I stayed as governor for many years for my home country, I say, well, when you negotiate with IFIs, it's basically take those two pillars of wisdom from Deng Xiaoping. Will do it faster, more efficient, and we'll do it better in terms of quality. If not, please seek some other way of doing business. Here, on areas related to adaptation, we are lacking finance. Private sector is contributing by less than 3% of total. And when we were checking the figures a couple of years ago, we thought it's the bottom. It was around 3.5%. Now it's declining. We need to do more. MDBs have been trying to do something better in this area. I'm happy that the Green Climate Fund is one of the few institutions that is doing 50% of its portfolio. And I'm happy that AIIB is paying attention as well to this kind of work today. But when we were preparing for COP27, 80% of finance from the MDBs were basically for mitigation, where you can really see that the private sector can do a better job. When we need the help, concessional finance, technology, and regulations that are very much required in adaptation. For that, we can really be doing a great deal of acceleration of funding, supported with technologies. I'm happy now that great deal of technology that we're doing, including what I saw in Morocco, in my neighborhood, or my own country, Egypt, like the BIMBAM project in Egypt or Wazazat, happened through this kind of partnerships. Western inventions, Chinese innovation, but more again coming from China, as we have seen, production at scale. So this can, and of course, a great deal of adaptation for the needs for the home country. This is the mitigation front. What we need in adaptation is much more. We are seeing heat waves, not just in China, but my daughter is in Washington, D.C. She told me she's competing with us in heat. We are around 40 degrees. So, and Egypt, of course, is not short of hot weather. What we need really to see, we are having variety of reminders that climate action is not something for the end of this century. It's for immediate action. And action here requires finance. What we see today, South-South cooperation is giving us a great deal of opportunities. Again, areas related to finance, but we need to do a better job with the MDBs in leveraging the private sector, providing de-risking, and doing more in areas where the private sector is not flowing to. And here as well, I'm happy as well, and this is my final point in this regard, because that's what I'll be seeing in Belém, where I mentioned about climate action and development. There is going to be as well a great deal of emphasis on nature, and a great deal of emphasis on the operationalization of Article 6 after the good progress that we had seen in Baku. And I'm very pleased as well that China is doing well in the trading of carbon, and this could provide another opportunity, not just for energy, but again for trading carbon for nature and for climate at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Such a comprehensive overview. Well, let's hope that they will open the agenda on time. And as we all know, UNFCCC is famous for taking some time and not working as fast as we want them to do. But let's move to our next panelist, the Green Climate Fund, representative from the Green Climate Fund. GCF, just like AIIB, is around the same age, right? You're 10 years old, we're 10 years old. So there's some similarities in terms of, setting up a new institution. So we would be very keen to hear from you on, from your point of view, what are the kind of best models and partnerships out there that GCF has deployed to mobilize climate financing? And is there anything that you think AIIB should do to also scale up climate financing in going forward?
Thank you, Julia. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. I'm also very honored to be part of this panel. And I'm also honored to be also sharing it with Dr. Mohildin, who was a key pillar in our most recent replenishment, as he played a role of key convener. So thank you, Dr. Mohildin, for having helped us reach a record replenishment. So to provide a little bit of context, indeed, the 10th year anniversary is like a shared birthday. Today is the birthday party of the AIIB, and we're very pleased to be here. But indeed, the Green Climate Fund did its first transaction right before COP21 in 2015. So this is our 10th sort of operational anniversary. We were created a little earlier, but we were able to start programming. Fast forward, we have already programmed almost $17 billion in over 300 projects in 133 countries. We're going to be having our next board meeting next week in Papua New Guinea. We like to also do our board meetings closer to those that are the most vulnerable, and the small island development states are indeed important. And we're bringing $1.3 billion worth of funding in 19 projects. So this is already, I would say, we've been able to ramp up, but at the moment be at that growth phase. But it's also going to be the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And the Green Climate Fund is one of the operating financial mechanisms of the Paris Agreement and of COP. So it is very reassuring to hear from Dr. Xu on this leadership that China wants to play in the global climate finance architecture. We really need, given the current geopolitical realities, we really need to keep the climate ambition in top of the agenda. The NCQG, which as you know has been one of the outcomes of Baku, call that we're going to triple the investments. And to reaching that, 1.5 trillion requires all efforts. And the efforts go beyond sovereigns. We need to engage the private sector. As Dr. Mohildin said, we need to look at other alternative sources. And we need to also look at new leadership in regards to who could be financing. So it's really welcoming to hear the commitment from China and others in this regard. Now, the Green Climate Fund, we are a true catalyst when it comes to climate finance. We were created, as I mentioned, because of the need to help countries, developing countries, go through this transition of low carbon and climate resilient economies. So we are a high risk taker, we are a patient investor, and we are a flexible investor. So we're able to do any financial instrument, from grants to loans to guarantees to private equity to bonds. Very pleased that we're going to be bringing a transaction next week, which is going to be a subcomponent of the GGBI, the Global Bond Initiative of the European Union. And through the AIIB, we're going to have also a possibility of allowing countries to be able to issue bonds related to climate, and we're going to be providing first loss. We're able to really catalyze, and here around 6 billion of the 16.7 billion that we've committed have gone to private sector. Because it is in the private sector where we could see that true, blending capacity, and we can do it across different things. Dr. Mohildin mentioned that we do have this mandate, that we have to be 50-50 adaptation mitigation on grant equivalency terms. I'm very pleased to say that today we are 59 in adaptation on grant equivalency, which is a very, I would say, big endeavor, but this is only possible because of partnerships. We are a partnership-led organization. We do not make direct investments. We're extremely happy to be hosted in Korea, but we work with our partners who are close to the countries. We've got 141 partners, and our partnerships vary from MDBs. Actually, today I was very pleased to sign the accreditation master agreement with AIIB. So AIIB is a partner now, and we were able to accredit AIIB in October and to sign the IMA today. And with Mr. Kim here, we are committed to bring a transaction and celebrate it next year. The Green Climate Fund, as any startup, has had a journey, and that journey is now, I would say, reaching an important growth. But we have been really focused on efficiencies. We have been really focused on impact. And with the leadership of our executive director, Mafalda Duarte, who came on about 2 years ago, we are now committed to bring transactions to the board within 9 months of review from our side. So we really want to really push this reform. And the other element of the reform is that we have now vertically integrated all the departments of the fund to work through regions. And our board approved regional presence. So we hope to be in the regions closer to our partners, hopefully by the end of 26, beginning of 27. So here, we are the largest multilateral climate fund, and I think the success of our partnerships is to work with everyone's strengths, play on each of us strengths in order to really bring impact. And I think that one of the things that is clear is that climate finance is overly fragmented. And we need to move from a transaction by transaction into more systemic approaches on how we deal with it. And as Dr. Mohildin said, climate is part of all the SDGs. So for us, we're now seeing and being more intentional on the nexus between climate and health, between climate and food systems, between climate and education. We're bringing an education project to our next board in the Pacific Islands with the Global Partnership of Education House at the World Bank. So we really are trying to really place on our strengths. But lastly, we're country-driven. We really want to bring transactions that are key priorities of the countries to meet their NDCs or the national adaptation plans. And I think this is what maybe makes the GCF a little different, because that country-drivenness is at the core of how we were created, and we hope that our capital through our partners reaches the most vulnerable people and communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Henry. So country-drivenness, which means you are really looking into what the countries are asking GCF to finance, and you're working with the partners to make that kind of a reality. So I think it's a very good segue to our next panelist, the representative from the New Development Bank, DJ Pandian. You have worked with AIIB previously, so you're very familiar with a startup type organization like AIIB. You're now with the New Development Bank, which is also a new MDB on the block. You're working in India, so very closely rooted in the country that is, one of the most vulnerable countries today. Could you maybe share some insight into what the clients are also asking yourselves to finance as an MDB? Is it really that there is a trade-off to be done between climate and economic growth, or are the clients asking yourselves to do the type of investments in green energy transition and the likes?
Thank you. First of all, I congratulate our President Jin, who has done an exemplary job in creating this bank, green, clean, and lean bank, and celebrating this 10th anniversary. I also thank him for inviting me for this as one of the panelists. I'm also happy to announce that I was the first vice president in charge of operations in this bank and chief investment officer for 2 terms, first 3 years plus 3 years. It is during my tenure, my team put up this ESG bond. When it was piloted, this bond, a lot of apprehensions from various member countries. How this will work out? Will they able to raise money? Will they able to sell in the retail? Will it help the entrepreneurs? All these apprehensions have been wiped out. It was a great success to raise this money, and private investors like even Blackstone and all stepped in. HSBC stepped in. So this fund was a great success. But based on my experience, as the panelist asked the question, it is always a trade-off between cost and growth. 10 years, 15 years ago, yes, everybody was apprehensive about the cost of how to fight against the climate change, how to make our projects climate friendly. But now the thing is different. 15 years ago, when I was the secretary of the energy department in government, Gujarat, government of India, the Prime Minister Modi, he declared war against climate change because the country was facing several disasters after disaster. Earthquake in Gujarat, next year there will be flood, another year drought. So it has created a lot of miseries to the people. How to overcome this? It is because of the climate change. He declared the earth doesn't belong to us. It belongs to our children and grandchildren. How to safeguard this earth? How to reduce the carbon footprint? So we wanted to promote the clean energy in the state of Gujarat. And promoting clean energy in 2010, 2012, it's a big task. The cost is high. The technology was not very common. We wanted to promote solar energy. Yes, panels are available in China, cheap panel, but how to bring it, how to fit it, how to connect the power with the grid, lot of challenges. And entrepreneurs were apprehensive, who will pay for the money? So it is here the government has stepped in. We will create the infrastructure, we will give you the land, we will develop the land, we will give you the electricity connectivity, and you have to raise money, you have to invest and all those things. So the infrastructure risk is taken care by the government, the financial risk taken care by the private entrepreneurs. So there is a perfect public-private partnership, and Prime Minister told, I will not give you land near the village or near the city. You have to go out to the desert, find out the land where there is no farmers are there. Yes, we found out the land, but then it's a low-lying area, it's a desert. How will you make it flood-free? How will you harvest the rainwater? We did invest a lot of money in making the land, in making the environment friendly. Then the local people object, you are going to put up a big solar park, 500 megawatt. Our village does not have the electricity. There is no street light. Then we provided the street light. What about employment? Then we trained the people. Thanks, Hun Kim was the country director of AIIB. I got 80 million loan from him to put up a transmission network. And when we put the transmission network, 2 towers passing through wildlife sanctuary, nearby wildlife sanctuary. And AIIB will not allow me to do that. That's very good. So we need to zip the line. Cost is extra. Government was happy enough to do that. Wildlife is also important like our human being. So we respected the wildlife. We respected the human being. We have taken care of the social fallout or the social cost. And finally, when we developed the reservoir to collect the rainwater, when we controlled the flood, when we put up the transmission system, transmission line with the help of ADB, then IFC stepped in to finance the green energy, solar energy project. You know what was the cost of the green energy, solar energy? 25 cents. 25 cents. Lot of criticism from the opposition party. India is a highly democratic country. Huge criticisms. Why you are going for such a costly energy? But our Prime Minister declared, I will do that, because if I don't do this today, tomorrow nobody will do it. The cost will not come down. So there was a political will to promote the solar energy. With the political will, when we take care of the environment and social safeguards, then private people stepped in, MDB stepped in finance, IFC stepped in, local bank stepped in, and there was a 500 megawatt solar park for the first. This was a first example, model in the whole world. That was replicated when I came here in AIIB in Egypt and all those things. Private entrepreneurs, 11 projects of 550 megawatt each. That day we put 500 megawatt, the tariff was 25 cents. Today we have 30,000 megawatt of solar energy, the tariff is less than 1 cent, from 20 cents to less than 1 cent. So the cost, initially it may look high, but over a period of time, the growth is very important. The growth which is friendly to the public, which is friendly to the environment is important. So the perception is changed. Private people are coming in, government is also coming in. So today is the time to invest more and more in climate-friendly projects, in disaster-resilient projects to save our earth for the future generation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pandi. And it is so interesting to always hear a story. I love stories on the panels, and you really demonstrated how a political will and then the private sector mobilization and replicability was right there in this one very interesting story from India to Egypt, with the MDB coming in and the second one MDB following through. So I think this is a really great example of what MDBs can do in catalyzing the climate financing. Let me move to our last panelist, DJ Hun Kim, who will speak on what AIIB has done so far, and we would be very keen to hear from you, and the audience is very interested to learn on our climate journey. So, as you all know, AIIB has 2 climate targets specifically that were set during our first 10 years. One is 50% of our financing should be climate by 2025, and the second one was on the Paris alignment, that all of our investment operations should be aligned with the Paris Agreement. So it would be very interesting to hear, in your view, why has the AIIB set such an ambitious target, and has it really influenced the way we as a startup institution went and grew to where we are today?
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, before target, you mentioned that you like stories, right? So actually, as a person who's been working in the field, doing projects for many years, I have many stories. Of course, I have stories with Dr. Pandian. When we worked together, he was Principal Secretary of Energy under the government of Prime Minister Modi, you know. And those were the days, still early time of solar. Solar, we used to call it solar farm, right? So MDB, yeah, solar park, India, we used to call it solar park. So a lot of stories there, actually. The MDBs were doing, building the park, and also at the same time, more important, equally important is transmission line, you know. So those only MDBs mostly could do it. But more, and looking back, actually, many people here may not agree with me. Maybe this is politically a little dangerous comment, I don't know, but MDBs, in my view, has not much role to do in solar PV, you know. It is, because when we started many years ago, there was no, MDB's role is a market maker. So when we started many years ago, for instance, no commercial bank will lend any money for a solar project, you know. And so, and also commercial bank, they didn't know how to do the credit analysis. So we started with the initially subsidized loan and capacity building and all these things, and that's how we create the market. So I think MDB, in that sense, has a lot of role to play, especially in the new types of energy and fuels. We are talking about hydrogen and all other things. Now, about the target, please stop me if I stay too long. AIIB has never declared itself as a climate bank, you know. Many other banks did. But by default, we are a climate bank. Some people may think, oh, AIIB is an infrastructure bank, but they don't care climate. No, not at all. Because we do infrastructure, it's automatically whatever we do is climate and Paris aligned, you know, Paris aligned. That is why last year, what are our sectors? Energy, heavy infrastructure, or a little soft infrastructure, energy, transport, urban. Last year, our number was 67% of climate finance because we do all these projects, yeah, heavy projects. And as you mentioned, our target is 50%. And we are quite comfortable, you know, to achieve this target. So we even this year, in the new corporate strategy, even the number, you know, how many billions we will deliver. Because the billions are important. So COP29 was all about finance COP. Maybe we are running out of topics, so technical topic, because somebody said technology-wise we are quite ready, you know. We just need to find ways to finance it, apply it, you know. So COP29 was a finance COP, and numbers were floated. Already mentioned, $1.3 trillion bigger. Yeah, most of this should be delivered by private sector. But for developing countries, we all remember 300 billion to be developed. These numbers actually is quite serious for MDBs, because MDBs have committed in the same meeting, out of 300, you know how much will come from MDB altogether? It will be our official formal commitment of 120 plus our private capital mobilization. So almost 180 is supposed to come. So in a way, I feel, donor countries are shifting responsibilities more and more to MDBs. And so maybe MDB has more role to play. That is what G20 expects us to do. So that is why MDB work as in a system, all that. So that is why the dollar amount for MDB is very, very important. And for AIIB, I believe will play an increasingly important role. because some sensitivity on this green agenda these days, but AIB is well positioned to support and promote this climate finance. So now we are moving to Balem COP30. Again, COP30 is expected to be largely the financing focus, you know. So financing focus, that is my last comment in this regard. That is why, I mean, MDB will continue. I believe we have sufficient money and capital, and we'll continue, or we will mobilize more money based on our good credit we can do. But what is lacking is to bring private money in. You need all those projects, borderline, marginal, bankable projects, push them across the line. That is where agency like GCF is very important. So we've been looking for the options. We've been talking about innovative financing very intensively last 2 to 3 years. The problem in innovative financing is they remain as innovative. They are bespoke. It's very difficult to scale up. We all agree by now, you know. And also the tool of innovative financing, the list is so many. There are some very successful bonds and different capital market operation, but in terms of direct funding and modality, many of them are difficult to replicate. Or Inter-American Bank is very successful, one deal here, but when you start another deal in Asia, we have to restart all again. So innovative financing is okay, but still more important is the baseline financing, you know, and especially concessional money. But concessional money, all MDBs, we have concessional money in MDBs in general, but it's all committed. That's why the role of GCF and similar organization, which will push the bankability beyond, so that we can do innovative finance project in scale, not just as a pilot only. So that is a challenge to a bank like AIB to try.
Indeed, I think, thank you. Innovation is very important, and like you said, there's always some context-specific considerations when it comes from one country to another, right? And I do see a lot of panelists nodding their heads that they are agreeing that each and every actor in this panel here really has a role to play. Well, let me move to Mr. Shu again. Just a quick question, and mindful of time, we only have 30 minutes, so please request you to make a short intervention. And I'll try to focus this round of questions really to what would be your recommendation AIB should do going forward in the next decade to come, reflecting on what we have done already, trying to set the climate targets in place. If there's one suggestion that you say AIB as an MDB should do in the space of climate, what would that be?
好，我刚才听了各位的嘉宾的介绍，也是深受启发。我个人还是强烈建议亚投行在中国围绕着我刚才提出来，我们中国政府明确提出要规划应对气候变化一揽子重大工程。我理解的一揽子的重大工程，既包括减缓，又包括适应。 同时还包括软硬的基础能力建设，尤其是在适应方面，我们希望这个亚投行在进一步支撑中国加快青藏高原生态保护和修复，尤其是适应型的生态保护和修复工程方面，重大工程方面，在强化推动中国 气候适应型国家重大调水项工程，在我们城市生命线基础设施建设方面， 以及我们围绕着沿海的海塘堤坝等基础设施建设方面，进一步加大对中国的这个投融资的支持。另外还有一方面，因为我们习主席也明确提出，我们要大力支持发展中国家加快能源的绿色低碳发展，所以我也希望亚投行围绕着中国与非洲小岛屿国家等开展的这个发达国家开展的有关能源，特别是可再生能源建设方面，进一步加大资金的支持。好，我就说这两点建议。
Thank you so much, Mr. Xu. So, nature, ecological restoration, building climate resilience, mostly really focusing on the adaptation. Mr. Maguldin, would you also agree with that? Is there something that AIIB can do to improve this alignment with SDG specifically? And given we are an infrastructure investment bank, is there one recommendation on action you suggest the AIIB should also focus on?
Right. On SDGs, on climate, we have recognized the importance and the pivotal role of infrastructure, finance and investment. And before I get into this, the countries that have been mentioned often here, India, China, India, and from time to time, smaller countries in size. We feels that the country is relatively small when we come to China or to India, but we're a country of 110 million people. It's one of the biggest in our continent. But these kind of drives towards achieving climate action didn't really prevent these countries, China and India, for achieving the most important goal of all, which is SDG 1, fighting extreme poverty. I was here in 2019, and I met the premier then, and he told us that by 2020 we'll be achieving the end of extreme poverty in China. And we do that not through charity, not donations, but investments in the areas outlined. Investment in infrastructure, investment in human capital, including health and education, and investment in resilience at large, including in investment against the shocks. India, 2024, correct me if I'm wrong, announced as well the end of extreme poverty. That was in the run-up of the elections that Mr. Modi's won. So for countries, there are lessons here. South-South, it's not just about the money coming from South-South. It's not about the technical cooperation that we can benefit from Indian examples or Chinese examples through the bridge of the AIIB. Because here, as it happens in the best or better days of the World Bank, it's not just an institution of finance. It was a bridge of knowledge, technical assistance with a convening power. This is the same thing, that the AIIB is not just about money. It's about knowledge, technical assistance, and sharing experience. And then, in how to do that better, I've seen that list and been very much involved in the reforms of the MDBs and the FIs. We need a great deal of portfolio rebalancing, and we mentioned the bias, not just within the climate agenda, mitigation against adaptation, but in other areas as well of development. Instrument innovation, I'm very happy with what was mentioned just now, that innovation sometimes gets us into trouble if it is not replicated. So there is no innovation for innovation's sake. I appreciate especially the young experts coming with a great idea from a top university, want to push it, great. But here, the experience tells us, will it be replicated? Will it be expanded? Will it be scaled up? And what it takes for that to happen. And the third is basically about finance, and in the coming 2 days, the dominating theme for Seville is not going to be about mobilization of finance from DRM, it will be there, from private sector it will be there, but the trouble associated with debt. And how can we use debt better? How can you get a loan that will have an economic, commercial, and social returns than what it has? And how can we avoid having countries in debt traps, by having responsible lending and borrowing principles, and the AIIB should be on the lead on doing that. And the other thing is basically what we can do better in swapping some of the existing debt into opportunities for investment, including in climate. There are debt swaps for climate adaptation. We have seen that in nature. We have seen that in a variety of other activities, but that could really be an area of work. And then, my good friend, Mr. Gonzalez, reminded me of the good journey of the successful replenishment. The shareholders, the stakeholders, those who love the Green Climate Fund, and the rest of the financial institution, they said, well, we need more localized impact, we need more partnership with the private sector, and we need more regionalization of your work. So this is not just a message to the Green Climate Fund, it's as well for the AIIB. And the very final thing, and I'm happy with the adequate capital that AIIB has, and the promise that was reiterated yesterday in the speech of the president of the bank, that the 10 years are just a start and there are more of 10 years come. So here, what we need really to see, don't follow in that kind of a trap that we see in some of the old legacy institutions, that you can do more with less. Yeah, you can do more, definitely with more, with better efficiency. But this gimmick, doing more with less, we have growing gaps. We started with 2.5 trillion, now it's 4 trillion and growing. Energy alone, based on the estimates of everyone who is working on energy, they are telling us we are in need of $5.3 trillion every year globally, and the developing economies has a great deal of need for that. So what kind of innovative technique can really get me to bridge such gap by just being more efficient? So MDBs need to be always adequately capitalized, and it's a good opportunity. With every replenishment of capital, as it happened, with every increase of the paid-in capital, it's the right of the shareholder to go and check on the management. Are you doing better? Are you becoming more competent? Are you becoming more efficient? This is for always an ongoing kind of concern. But to go into this trap, do you need me to be better or bigger? No, for God's sake, I need you bigger, I need you better. But I need you for both, actually. Something not less of an importance. And I'm happy that AIIB is more inclusive, because the issue of even-handedness is a very big issue of concern with some of the legacy institutions. So the inclusiveness here, I cannot be an inclusive bank or brag for inclusive while the structure of the institution itself is not even, while there is some sort of problems when it comes to the decision-making of a lack of even-handedness. So I think these are basically the kind of institutions of the future. The studies, I was behind one of them, the independent high-level panel that estimated the gaps, led by Nick Stern and Vera Songwe and others. And we said here, we need to double bilateral finance, we need to triple finance from the MDBs, and we need to quadruple finance from the private sector. But mind you, none of that will happen alone. In order to get the private sector doing more, you need bigger MDBs to do what Mr. Gonzalez mentioned, and leveraging, de-risking, taking care of the first loss, and doing other areas of de-risking. So if we need really to save ourselves, not just future generations, if you want to save our planet, and at the same time achieve those big goals of SDGs, including ending extreme poverty, we need really to be much more serious than what we have been during the last 20 years. It's not a problem of one administration in one country. We have seen that kind of deterioration of attention to the MDBs for a great deal of time, and I'm very pleased and happy to see the growth of MDBs coming, including from China here, through the NDB and the AIIB. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahmoudin. So I think you also touched upon on the issues of inclusiveness and outreach and being accessible to all, right? And our next panelist, the GCF, is actually a financing institution that has a lot of members, and I think you have financed almost all of the developing countries out there, and you do indeed focus on the least develop the most vulnerable. So what would be your recommendation to AIIB? How can we also expand our outreach, and what type of shifts in financing should we do so that we can be more inclusive?
Thank you, Julia. When we started having the conversations towards accreditation, I said, let us start with programming in mind. Let us not just do an accreditation, like sometimes we do MOUs, with not a true planning behind. And what we said is, like, where do we have gaps as in our portfolio? And we found that we had gaps in Central Asia, and as Mr. Xu mentioned, we also had gaps in the Pacific Islands. And these, especially the Pacific Islands, the Green Climate Fund has a mandate from COP that 50% of adaptation, at least 50% of that must go to the most vulnerable, and they talk about African states, least developed countries, and small island development states. Today, we are actually at 69%. So we're above that floor. So we sort of discussed how do we work in those under program areas? But the other element, and in our new structure, we created a strategic partnerships and co-investment department, and I have one of my colleagues here, because we also want to make sure that our finite public capital mobilizes the most resources possible, from public and private resources. And I think this is what we are discussing with Mr. Kim and his team on how do we, innovate on a structure where the different capital stack can be populated by the right partners. Because I believe there's been perhaps a lack of discipline on where some of the capital provided sit in some of those structures. And, I openly have shared this. Some of the NDBs have been extremely conservative and not taking the risk they could be taking when they should be creating markets, as it has been said. So we are really trying to now use our finite capital, and with AIIB, we hope to announce a concept maybe at COP30 in Belém, where we can prove that this is doable and we could indeed go for it. The other important element is institutional capacity. In order for us to allow climate funds to flow to countries, we need to have the right policy suite. We need to have the right enabling environment. And the Green Climate Fund has, I would say, the largest technical assistance window that we call readiness, where our board has given us $500 million that we could deploy for 4 years, with countries could actually tap this, as well as some of our entities that are directly located in countries, to overcome some of those, policy or capacity constraints. We recently used that readiness to launch a country platform in Brazil. Because country platform is another important element, and that is, and I think G20 is trying to do this, how do MDBs, vertical funds, as sometimes they call the climate funds and others, how could we work closer together with the country priorities and making sure that we, 2 plus 2 is 3, instead of sometimes, somehow competing for resources, or maybe, fragmentizing the ecosystem even further. So I think we really want to do that. We just announced a regional platform led by Mia Motley, because not only as a Prime Minister of Barbados, but she's currently the President of CARICOM. So with the presidency of CARICOM, she's bringing her other fellow prime ministers to do also with a strong focus in some of the areas of energy, but also adaptation. And he was actually in Barbados talking to what Dr. Mohildin was talking, that with a partnership of the Inter-American Development Bank, we were able to work on a water reuse facility through a debt for climate swap. Because we also need to find solutions for countries that have very little fiscal space. We don't want to overburden them with our debt. We want to make sure that we use innovative financial structures that free up space, but at the same time address those needs. So I think we are on track, because I think since the beginning of our partnership, we started thinking, and I think AIIB can continue being bold in trying things new, because proof of concept helps a lot when others are able to follow and take it to another level. And I think, how you have, your track record in these 10 years, that ambition of 50% of your capital in climate, there's a lot of alignment, and I think we could work together. And, on the adaptation, we also need to allow locally led climate action to happen. We need to empower the regional, the subnational, the indigenous communities in also accessing capital. Sometimes things get very concentrated in the capital, and there is an important to really go as close as we can with the different vulnerable communities and people that we're trying to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. You again also shared a very interesting story on the deal in Barbados you had with, I believe it's AIIB and yourselves, and it was on the debt for climate swaps, and it's another one of the instruments that we could explore. Mr. Magudin also mentioned that as part of the considerations that AIIB could perhaps look into. But moving on to Mr. Pandian, to just maybe drill a little bit on this private sector role, and you've also shared some of your experiences as an MDB. We really have to work with the private sector, and everybody mentioned that we cannot do this alone. What can AIIB do to work better and more collaboratively with the private sector?
Thank you. MDB alone cannot fund the climate finance. We need to leverage the private sector. But private sector is different. Today, I'm dealing with two countries, India and Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, the capital is very scarce, including debt. In India, it is easy to raise debt. Banks, commercial banks, are filled with a lot of liquidity and all those things. They can easily lend money to any private sector project or any climate project. It may be, the question is only the time. They do finance at a very good time, at a very short period. But what is needed in India is a risk finance. The private sector is little risk averse, naturally, because they are accountable to their shareholder. They don't want to lose their money. But unfortunately, as told by Mr. Henry, that many of the MDBs are very reluctant, very conservative in their approach and all those things. So we need to come out of these old legacy systems, policies, procedures, analysis, appraisal and all those things. We need to be quick enough. At the same time, we need to shift from debt funding to equity funding. Equity is needed. Without equity can leverage a lot of amount, a lot of projects and all those things. Because that risk appetite of MDB should go up, and it should bring down the cost of risk of private sector projects. In Bangladesh, of course, it's highly vulnerable for climate change. It's a country of rivers. It's a heavy rain. It's very difficult to cope up with the climate change. It can submerge many parts at any time. And all. How we are going to fight against it? How we are going to decarbonize the whole economy? We need a lot of investment, both debt and equity. So here, everybody has to step in. The concession finance can play a great role. But how to synchronize MDB's money with concession finance like climate fund and all those things? That is a challenge. We need to come together, work together, discuss together, talk together, prepare the plan together and implement it. Then there will be a definitely success. This dialogue has to be initiated as quickly as possible between MDBs and the concession finance giving people. So for AIIB, my advice today is that make your rules simple, be lean. Lean doesn't mean only minimum people. Your procedures, policies, rules, regulation also should be lean and all those things. And approve quickly and approve risk funding. If you do this, definitely next 10 years will be easy for everyone, and AIIB will reach the greater heights. It is applicable to my bank, NDB also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So be quick, be reactive, and also deploy your equity financing. We in the AIIB indeed are very well doing that, and I think Mr. Hun would be happy to speak to some of the examples that we have financed. But maybe first I would like to ask you, DG Kim, if you would want to react to any of the suggestions. And I also note that the AIIB has recently approved an updated corporate strategy. There are some further targets. If you would like to discuss more targets, to say what are we doing now, and if you would like to react to any of the suggestions provided by the panelists, now is your chance.
Thank you. Yeah, so AIIB in our name is Asian Bank, but AIIB is a global bank. We have 110 member countries, and we can lend outside Asia, So that's why, for the first time this year, we are doing operation in Brazil, for instance. Big flood there, right? So it's all climate. Outside the region, we can do mainly climate projects because climate is global issue. So by tackling climate issue outside Asia, that will have a material impact on Asia. But our operations still are limited, less than 40 countries. So we have a duty, we have a task to do more, especially in small island countries. So as my former BP, Mr. Pandian said, lean is good, but you should also expand your work as a small island country is one. And so since you mentioned the target, I mentioned the MDB's commitment last year made our own operation is about 120 billion. But last MDB report, we reported that we delivered together 75 billion, So this is quite doable. But I don't think all MDBs have enough capital to double their lending. That means they have to increase their percentage climate finance. This is a challenge, So World Bank used to have a target of 45%. If World Bank increases it to 80% and everybody else does, achievable. Otherwise, they have to increase their lending. And these are very difficult times, but MDB loans are not cheap, which our interest rate is pretty high. So many countries are facing even tapping our money. So it is a challenge, but it is a job to be done. And can I just still comment a little bit on innovation? Because in the end, innovation is the only solution. Here, in my view, innovation solution is not about financing innovation. It's a technology innovation which are available. Yeah, for instance, financing innovation, I'm still working on AIIB's first sovereign debt swap. So we have done our homework. We have reviewed all the countries we operate, potentially lend, and try to find a sweet spot whether we can make this bankable, But again, that swap is good. We still try to do it, but in terms of we calculated all the money, dollar, is in terms of scale, not that much. But it is good for the country, especially for smaller countries. It will be useful. Again, unlocking private capital, we need concessional and blended finance is the big thing we are talking about. I approach seeking help from GCF for blended finance, for junior capital. But the data shows since we talk about blended finance, all the money mobilized blended finance is optimistically $250 billion, right? But this morning, our flagship project, infrastructure gap, say SDG goal, we need at least something like $3 trillion. And so blended finance, yes, I'm really seeking blended finance. So given my operational size, if I can get it, I can do a lot. But Again, it's $250 billion, very small. So I think innovation, good example to me is, again, solar is a good example. So solar MDBs play the market player role. With how much World Bank MDB has, you know. But it worked well. Now, nobody needs MDB. India's solar market, yeah? Well developed. It goes on its own way. This has to be the model, you know. They don't want our money. They don't want my money. Actually, I also do the marketing, but very often market established, they say, I don't need your money. Okay, so solar is one example. Now, so innovation not in product, not individual product. Innovation in the technology, solar, EV, you know, or I don't know, hydrogen is a long way to go, but energy, what type of energy, you know? So this big thing, big market. So big market MDBs have to play a catalytic initial market maker role. Then without innovative financing, private sector will come in and invest, but still we can use private sector innovative financing in the very beginning to trigger, to create incentive to do that. Just finally, quickly, I spent my 5 minutes already. The adaptation, you know. So, yeah, we are very confident, proud that we have achieved our climate target, but apparently we have fall far behind adaptation by the nature of what products we do. So this is a challenge. But on the other hand, I read very recently, 2 weeks ago, a report by WRI on, I think it's a very important report, this dichotomy between adaptation and mitigation. We need to solve this one, you know, because somehow MDBs are all my climate lending, my performance measured by how much dollar I provided, you know. Then definitely I want to do only metro project. It's 100% is counted. And adaptation is more difficult, right? Health sector also. I've been complaining, health sector, whatever I do, health sector is not counted well, you know. So adaptation, I think adaptation by time, yeah, to do transition. Adaptation also protect the values of mitigation asset, you know. And adaptation has a bigger social economic impact. So I truly believe we need to rethink, okay, how we can this adaptation mitigation dichotomy and how both of these work together for the common. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hoon Kim. So with that, we've concluded our 2 rounds of questions, but in case there is 1 or 2 questions from the audience, we still have 2 minutes left. If there is some burning questions, I would be opening up the floor for the Q&A. I think everybody is very comfortable and keen and perhaps a little bit tired. So let me just conclude with saying that it's been a very interesting and insightful panel, and I want to thank the panelists for your great contributions. We heard a lot from the different organizations, and I think some of the key takeaways we can say that AIIB really needs to work hard on financing innovation, more bladed finance instruments, working with other organizations that can do that, and support adaptation. And with that, I think we have a great impact and great decade ahead. Thank you so much.